So it's time to answer another Stack Overflow question. So the one I found here is reset variable in JavaScript on execute. So the question is, or rather the setup is, I'm using the function this function to auto-click a button after 15 seconds. The problem is that the user doesn't leave the page after the option is run, and it may be rerun again on the same page, but the timer continues. In fact, the timer continues even if I do the action myself. And then we have some code here. So this script should run the timer and press the button in 15 seconds, and then the timer should stop counting and reset until run again. If the button is pressed manually before 15 seconds, it should reset. Okay, so let's copy paste this over to our setup here and have a look. So here is the original code that I copy pasted from the question, and I have a basic file set up here which has the element with a label 1 ID because I saw that over here. And then I have a input just as the code that was shown on Stack Overflow was showing. And if we go to my document here, we can see that if I refresh this page, we see a counter that's starting to count down. 10, 9, 8, yeah. So it keeps on going. And as I understand it, the desired effect here is that when it hits 0, which is the intended behavior, we should reset to 15 seconds. And if I do this again, and if I click done, as you can see, nothing's happening right now. So it should probably just click done and go back to 15, I think, maybe. That's the way I look at this. But let's see if we can solve this, and if we can, maybe it will be of some use to my friend with the question here. So by looking at this code, I see a few things that I want to take a look at immediately. So I think I know how to solve this, but I also want to touch on some things that might be helpful to you guys, at least if you're still learning and stuff like that. So first and foremost, we are declaring a time variable up here which holds the time that we're going to count down for, and this is perfectly fine. However, this is a global variable declaration, and you shouldn't do that. Don't do this, because it's actually very dangerous. It's a fairly bad practice, and the reason why is that if I did something like foo like that, that's now going to be globally accessible outside of this function. And what we want to do, just as a rule of thumb, is to declare our variables either as a var, which is the old way, or nowadays we do a let instead. So I know that just to be clear, this doesn't make much of a difference at the top level where we are here in the global space, because it's in effect doing the same thing. But it's just a really good practice to remember, and just remember it. And then we have an interval, which is pretty cool. Let's see if we can make that a const, because the rule of thumb is if a value never changes, just use const. Okay, and then we have a function over here, which is perfectly fine, but since we're ES6 people, let's do it ES6 style. And then we have a decrement of the time here, which is perfectly fine. And this is something I would recommend not doing. So what's happening here is that on this interval, every second we are going to go to the DOM, pull out this element, and set the inner HTML to this text here. And what's much more effective is to just pull this out and say, call this label, and let's call it const label. Do like that. So what the difference here is that now we're storing this reference, this node, in our memory, and then instead of going to the DOM every time and grabbing it, and because that's a fairly heavy heavy thing to do. I see this a lot of times, even in jQuery and stuff. For this little, our very simple purpose here, it's not something that's really that important, but it's a good practice to remember. So if you're gonna do something on the same node over and over and over again, don't just do this. Just grab it, put it in a variable, and you're good. And then I see that we do some plussing here. I'm thinking let's do this ES6 style. Let's do that so that we can do this. Hopefully that will work. So now we're setting the inner HTML, which is great. And then we have a double comparison here. This is not that dangerous, but I want you to know that there's a problem with JavaScript and how it handles equality. So the rule of thumb is always use triple equals for everything, unless you know exactly what you're doing. And the problem here is that if I say something like is 1 equal to 1, the string 1, this is going to be true, and that's not usually what you want. This will be false, which is the expected behavior, but this is true. So just as a rule of thumb, use triple equals. And here we're clearing the interval if the time is equal to 0, which is perfect. And then we do this button clicking here again. So I'm thinking let's do button, and let's put that there. Let's see if we broke anything. So we refresh. Oh, of course we did, which is great, because here I am forgetting to remove some stuff. There we are. See if this works. Yes, yes. And we click and nothing happens. So what's going on here? We've gotten pretty far so far. So what probably is happening is that yes, this is the problem, right? Let's clean this up a little bit as well. So first and foremost, we don't have to have this tag over here. We can do something like that, which is usually the way you want to write it. If you have a DOM element that doesn't have any children, you can do this instead. But what I'm seeing here is that we're missing an onClick function. So if I do onClick and I do something like stop time, there we are. I wonder if I can do this so it's a bit clearer what's going on here. Of course my auto formatter fixes that for me. Let me do this so we have maximum real estate. Here we are. So as you can see here, this element that's being clicked, it doesn't actually signal anything about itself. So it doesn't run any code when you're clicking it, but if you want it to stop, you have to tell it to stop, or rather put something there that's going to be run when you want it to stop. So I'm thinking, all right, let's do a const and let's do stop time like so, and let's log something out here. Foo. Oh, sorry. There we are. So now we're going to log something out every time we click this button. Click, click, click. Oh, as you can see, we're getting these foos here. Sorry about that. So now what I want is to steal this code over here, because that's absolutely correct. Let's do this. So now we're clearing the interval. So I do that and I click, and yes, the time has now stopped. So now the question is, which I'm a little bit iffy on here, it's, let's see here, it should reset. So what's happening here is that it should reset back to 15. That's what I think this person is asking for. Let me actually be a little bit more polite and say Chris. Yes, Chris. That's what I'm thinking that you're asking for. How do I reset it back to 15 now? And so what I would do here, if I were you, I would take this little thing here, make that something like that, and get text, for example, and I will put it something like this, const get text function, and this is going to return this text here. And then I would do something like this. Actually, no, you know what? It's probably better to just make that a const text. Let's see if that works. Or maybe it won't work. Let's try it out, because I think that should work, but I'm a little bit unsure about how the behavior is going to be here. We'll see. Let's see. Text and text. So the reason why I'm putting it down here is because the thing I'm noticing is that we are actually, you see, we have this time variable here, but we're not resetting it. So I do something like this. Let's now actually move it down there. And then we do time is equal to 15. And that should be it, really. Let's see what happens. Stuck. It is absolutely stuck at 15, which is kind of where I thought what was going to happen. Let's see if I can, let's just see if I get this right, because I'm actually a little bit curious myself here. Let's see if it works. Get text. Because I'm pretty sure this will work. Yes. So the problem is which is the thing that I was expecting, is that alright, so we create a constant variable, and it's not, you know, when we're resetting this reference isn't getting updated, but if we have a function that's returning this text there, it's going to reevaluate this string over and over again, which is exactly what we want. So let's start by clicking this button here. It resets to 15 and stops, which is great. And if we now wait the full 15 seconds, let's see, drum roll. Oh, alright, that got boring really quickly, but let's see. Yes, back to 15 seconds. Now, I think this is what you're looking for, Chris. I'm not really sure, but hopefully this little video of mine has been helpful, at least to give you some ideas about like the way that I think about this, and like hopefully it solves your problem. And yeah, have a great day.